Even when it seems to him that God is against him, a person of integrity only ascribes righteousness to God. Such a person is always impassioned for what is right.
Our second principle recognizes that though a heart of integrity loves what is good and hates what is evil, the feelings of the heart are not necessarily enough. A person with a heart of integrity has feelings that match his or her behavior.
We all know that it is possible to say one thing and do another. Sometimes we say that we are not angry, but secretly hold a grudge. Sometimes we say we forgive someone, but secretly wish for his or her downfall. Hypocrisy is the opposite of integrity. The Scripture hints at this in the book of Matthew, when Jesus said, "Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." If we cherish bad things, if we dwell in our hearts on unforgiveness, revenge, lust, anger, or other sinful behaviors, we may be able to hide them from others for a time, but in the end, we will always expose our true nature. The reality is that most of the time, our behaviors match what is going on inside of our hearts. To ensure that our behavior is in concert with what is in our heart, we need to fill our hearts with that which pleases God. The book of Proverbs admonishes, "Do not let kindness and truth leave you. Bind them around your neck. Write them on the tablets of your heart. So then you will find favor and good repute in the sight of God and man." A person of integrity feels the same way his or her behavior indicates, because the behavior is his outward expression of what is already in his heart.
Even though a person's outward behavior is usually an expression of what is already in the heart, there are times, many times, when we behave inconsistently with the good that we have in the heart to do. At such times we struggle between that part of us that wants to sin and the part of us that wants to do the right thing. This brings us to our third principle. A person with a heart of integrity repents when he discovers sin in his life.
When a person of integrity discovers sin in his or her life, that person will usually grieve over what they have discovered. The Old Testament paints a picture of what happens when a person of integrity is faced with their own sin. "I am ready to fall, and my sorrow is continually before me. For I confess my iniquity, and I am full of anxiety because of my sin." A person without integrity does not concern him or herself with sin and its effects, but a person of integrity will ask for forgiveness and seek to turn away from the sin committed. "I acknowledge my sin to you, and my iniquity I do not hide. I said, I will confess my transgressions to the Lord, and you forgave the guilt of my sin." A person with a heart of integrity has his innermost being, his heart, impassioned within him to always do what is right, including confessing his sin, so that he might be done away with it. Now, let's review our first three principles about integrity of the heart before we move on to integrity of the mind. Number 1. A person with a heart of integrity loves truth and hates all that is sinful and wrong. Number 2. A person with a heart of integrity has feelings that match his or her behavior. And number 3. A person with a heart of integrity repents when he discovers sin in his life. We're going to apply these same principles in our next segment, Integrity of Mind.
In our first segment, we focused on the integrity of the heart. By the heart, we mean the emotions, the feelings that we have that drive us to certain behaviors. Yet the heart is not the only inward part of man that drives his behavior. In fact, it is possible to control the heart through the agency of the mind. So let's apply our earlier first principle. A person with a mind of integrity dwells upon truth and righteousness, not evil or sin.
Sometimes we cannot control our emotions. We feel what we feel at any given moment. However, we can always control what we think. We can choose to dwell upon things that are good, true, and right, or we can dwell on that which is dishonoring or evil. What we choose to set our minds upon will eventually determine, in some cases, redetermine, how we feel. Look at what the Apostle Paul said about this in the book of Romans. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what the will of God is, that which is good and acceptable and perfect. The idea in this passage of proving God's will does not mean to prove something in the sense of offering an evidence. Rather, it means that by changing our thinking to that which is acceptable to God, our thoughts and behaviors become an evidence of godly living. The Bible recognizes that the Christian must intentionally set his or her mind upon right things. If we don't intentionally determine to fill our minds with that which is honoring and pleasing to God, then we will give deference to our sin nature. It is a constant battle that we must be diligent to fight. The Scripture states, "The mind set on the flesh is death, but the mind set on the Spirit is life and peace." To have a mind that transforms the way we feel and thus behave, we must make a concerted effort to fill our thoughts with the things that are right. Paul notes elsewhere in the Scripture, "Whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is of good repute, if there is any excellence, and if anything is worthy of praise, let your mind dwell on these things." When we build a habit of thinking rightly, then we can begin to feel rightly.
This brings us to our next point. A person with a mind of integrity has thoughts that match his heart and behavior.
If we are offended or hurt by someone over a long period of time, chances are our thoughts about that person will turn to dislike and even hatred. However, the Bible commands us to love your enemies. Therefore, we must intentionally retrain our minds to do what is right, so that our feelings and behavior will follow suit. We've already seen how this process works previously when we discussed dwelling on things that are right and conforming our minds to that of Christ. If we are conforming our minds to that which is pleasing to God, it will be evident to us. The thoughts of the righteous are just, but the counsels of the wicked are deceitful.
This brings us to the question, how can we know that we are becoming people of integrity? You see, it's really very simple. A person with a mind of integrity evaluates himself to be sure he is living a life of integrity.
In spiritual terms, the heart and the mind are two different things. Our hearts can deceive us. Look at what the prophet Jeremiah said about the heart, that is, the seat of our emotions. "The heart is more deceitful than all else and is desperately sick. Who can understand it?" Since the heart can trick us, we must make use of the mind to bring our heart, that is, our emotions, into conformity with God's standard of what is true and right. The Apostle Paul instructs us to test yourselves to see if you are in the faith. Examine yourselves. Or do you not realize that Jesus Christ is in you, unless indeed you fail the test? You can now begin to know that you are becoming a person of integrity by examining your emotions, your thoughts, and your behaviors to see if they are in concert with God's standard of righteousness.